Hello, everyone. This is Al Fadi, and I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of this series that we've been doing, myself and my guest here in the studio, Dr. Bill Warner, on the status of women in Islam. So far, we kind of laid out the ground rules of where the teachings come from, and also we discussed briefly some of the troubling teachings that are found there. Now, we last time we closed by showing a graph that Dr. Bill Warner did in terms of if you study the status of women according to the Quran, that's the word of Allah, and the Hadith, the word of Muhammad, whether they are treated equal or they have high status or low status. And the slide, I think, is in front of us as a sample here from the Hadith. I think you can see that usually their low status consumes most of the teaching that are found in the Hadith. Or let's go to the next slide from the Quran, as you can see. Why is this crucial? This actually flies in the face of the claim that Islam came and elevated the status of women and made them equal to man. And with that in mind, I want to really engage my guest here into the conversation. So, Bill, welcome back. And what say you about this?
Well, we're going to get into some details which are slightly funky, to use a hip word, because one of the things we need to talk about, I've discovered in listening to people what they know about Islam, in particular about Muhammad, there's one thing that most of them know about. He married Aisha when she was 6 and consummated the marriage when she was 9.
Right.
And so the reason this is important has nothing to do with Muhammad except for the fact he's the perfect example of a human being, the perfect Muslim. So this means that it is possible for a Muslim today to marry basically a child, a prepubescent child.
Which we will talk about it also.
So this to me is, when I first read this, I can actually remember reading, the first time I read the Hadith, I was like, wait a minute. No, that's what it says. 6 and 9.
Right. Yeah. And before we get into the marriage issue, last time we also mentioned something about Muhammad making the claim to a woman who asked him a question about the difference between inheritance given to man versus woman. And his response was that women are deficient in their brain. Here's another tradition that says the similar thing, but this one is even more vicious, actually, in its teaching. This one is found in Sahih Bukhari, and it says, Allah's apostle once said to a group of women, I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. Now notice, you are deficient in thinking intellectually, and you're deficient also in your religious duties. All right? A cautious, sensible man could be led astray by some of you. So now the man is the poor guy, you know? His temptation comes from the woman, basically.
She's the cause of the problem.
Exactly. Exactly. And at some point, he did say that about Eve. He says it was because of Eve, you know, and what she did. Basically, men now are led astray because women now can also be tempted and can cause someone to stumble because Adam, poor Adam, you know,
he was helpless.
Absolutely.
He couldn't do anything about it. Couldn't control his instincts.
Absolutely. And continuing on, the woman asked, "O Allah's apostle, what is deficient in our intelligence and religion?" So here's what he says. He said, "Is it not the evidence of 2 women equal to the witness of 1 man?"
It is.
From his point of view, the fact that it's a mathematical equation, 2 equal 1, that means the 2 are half. Each one of them are half that 1. They replied in the affirmative. He says, "This is the deficiency of your intelligence." And then the next part, isn't it true that a woman can neither pray nor fast during her menses, basically, or menstruation? And the woman replied in affirmative. He says, "This is your deficiency in your religion." Now, if you think about it on the surface, about the second answer at least, you would say, well, even the law, the book of Moses talks about things like this, women go into isolation and things like that. That's not the point. The women that we're talking about, the Israelites, are saved, and they're saved by the grace of God. They're chosen, right? It's not going to impact their work and their deeds. Islam is a religion of works. And
Yes.
if you don't do certain things, you're losing points. So what is Muhammad saying? You are losing points. You're not equal to us Bill, didn't Muhammad say he saw the majority of the hellfire to be women?
It was mostly filled with women, I believe it goes.
So he's kind of like affirming in affirmative here about the fact that you don't pray too much and fast too much. Sadly, you lose a lot of points and it will result in different destiny.
The other thing when I read this hadith was this. First, the Quran says they can't do the prayers when they're having their periods. Then they turn around and say that's proof that you're inferior. It's like, wait a minute. What if you didn't tell her that she couldn't pray when she was having her period? Would she suddenly be religiously better?
That's right. That's right. I mean, it's just, to me, it's very disturbing, when you read things like this, but it's more disturbing how it's being explained also. Oftentimes, it's almost like there is no regard to the feelings and emotions of women and treating them really with the respect that they deserve. But of course, in the mind of the person who's answering, is going to say, well, that's what Muhammad says.
Exactly.
That's what the Quran says, which goes back to your point earlier about, do we learn about Islam from a Muslim or from the sources?
I say we trust the sources.
Right. And you call them what, Professor?
I call them you need to be a student of Professor Allah and Dr. Muhammad.
Yeah, they're the ones who dictated to you what you ought to do.
Exactly. And so let's go back again. We started off in this series saying how easy it was to learn about Islam. Let me repeat it. You just have to know what Muhammad said and did and what's in the Quran.
Absolutely. I'm trying to look now for another teaching. Believe it or not, Hadith also teaches that women are deficient in their gratitude towards their husbands, for instance.
This is true. You're not grateful.
That's right. So here is the Hadith tradition that it says from Bukhari as well. Women are ungrateful to their husbands and are ungrateful for the favors and good deeds done to them. I mean, one would argue done to them by their husband, actually. I mean, since that's the context. If you have always been good to one of them, now he's making the case that if you're good to any of the women, technically speaking, and then she sees something in you, she will say, I have never received any good from you.
He paints a very bad picture. That women are not grateful.
And they're complaining all the time.
Right.
And they will never appreciate, Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure you read all of Sahih Bukhari, correct?
Yes.
How did you feel about things like this when you came across them?
Well, I was irritated to the point of being actually irritated is too light a word, because this is subjugation of women, and I don't see that this. Why is it necessary to subjugate them? I mean, that's my question, really. I mean, I've been married for a long time, and I didn't have to subjugate my wife. No, we had to work out a lot of details, but there was no attempt to subjugate. It was our working out issues was to achieve harmony, not subjugation.
That's right. And one can even argue that the status of women actually in Islam went downward, not upward, for a simple reason. You can observe that the wife of Muhammad, the first wife, Khadija, was a businesswoman.
Yes.
I mean, how many businesswomen these days can you find in Islamic settings as opposed to Western culture, for instance?
Almost none.
I mean, very low percentage. What does that say about the fact that they feel probably not comfortable competing in such an environment, or you never know how they will be treated, actually? Now, I'm not saying they don't have jobs. I'm not saying there are no businesswomen, but they're not that prominent. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And that shows basically if they feel there is equality, they wouldn't have really be such a low number. Mm-hmm. They all would have ventured into doing business. Another thing, now women are deficient in their witness. This is the Quran itself that teaches something like this, which is, the cause for that hadith. The witness of woman, basically, according to the Quran, 2 women equal the witness of 1 man. I mean, if the God of Islam himself is saying clearly, women are, half basically the authority, let's say, half the wisdom, half the intelligence, half the capacity of man, then how can a Muslim man react to this? And how can a Muslim woman react to this without recanting their faith? If you want to follow Islam, Bill, that's the teaching. That's what forces you to behave and act.
I think what most people do is they just try to ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist.
Right.
Because Muslims also feel some pressure from Western society. And so there are indeed some women who are wanting more equality within the marriage. Doesn't mean they get it, but at least they want it.
And that's an excellent point because, I'm sure you observe this. The Islam in the West is totally different than the Islam in the Middle East, for instance. Because Muslims in the Middle East are empowered by the majority of the culture.
Right.
Here, being a minority, you don't want to look back, right?
Right.
Let's talk about the translation of the Quran. I like your example. What is the measuring rod that you use if the translation is good or bad?
Do they beat her or beat her lightly?
That's chapter 4, verse 34. The Arabic says, beat your wives. Some of the translators now, because it's an embarrassing thing, they say, beat her lightly. With the word lightly, it's not even there in Arabic.
Exactly. And what would it mean to beat them lightly?
Oh, they'll tell you all kind of stories. They use like a small stick,
Twig.
like something that has to brush your
Toothpick.
teeth with, or toothpick, stuff like that. I always say, why beat them anyway? What's the point behind that? And you see, because Muslims are honest enough to feel like they're stuck with the teaching, they can't tell you, oh, we're not going to use this hadith anymore. It doesn't apply. Or this verse is canceled. They can't come up with things like this because there is no precedence for that.
Right.
And Islam, as you rightly stated that before, its sources are timeless sources.
This is something we need to repeat. The examples of Muhammad are not just historical examples. They're prescriptions on how to act today. That is, you're supposed to act today just like it's 632 and you're living in Medina. That's the goal.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, Bill, I would like to talk about, sadly, marriage and divorce, but I feel like maybe this should be in a brand new episode that is dedicated to that.
Okay.
Because it's a deep topic, and we'll try to give the introductory kind of material about this. So, is there anything else we want to add to at least the status of women being deficient? From your own experience, your own interactions, with others, all over the world when you travel?
Well, the doctrine is there. Well, what I take some pleasure in is that even in the Middle East, there's beginning to be some pressure where women are now more equal. The Saudis are going to let a woman drive a car. Can you imagine?
Right. And just recently, also, the decision was made that basically a woman doesn't need a guardian, the guardian law. In other words, what that means is like if you want to travel just from one city to the other, or you want to fly somewhere, you have to have a male guardian with you. That could be your brother, husband, of course, father, something to that extent. Because you can look at it as a protection. Said that's noble. You want to protect your daughter. You want to protect your wife. But the idea, can she travel alone if you're not available? No. The law prohibited that. Now they have lifted that ban.
How do they justify doing that?
Well, it's a tension that is taking place, trying to modernize and fit with the rest of societies. And at the same time, it's really going to cause a tension between, government and religious authorities, because the religious authorities are not going to be happy about something like that, of course, because they know the teaching of Islam doesn't permit something like that.
It's got to be, I say, I'm not living in that society, but it's got to be interesting to see how these tensions play out. Yeah. Because on one hand, Islam is expanding into Europe and America, but on the other hand, it's being nibbled at in the back.
That's right.
Are now.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, with that said, next time most likely will be the last episode of this series, Women in Islam. We are going to address the topic of marriage, the topic of polygamy, the topic of divorce, the topic of child marriage, the topic of the fact that women are sexual toys for pleasure in heaven, not necessarily on earth, which we will address, and things of that nature. So, stay tuned, buckle up, and wait for the next episode. And my prayer is that if you're sharing these videos with your female Muslim friend, that you need to pray about this. You need to be gentle on how to handle it. Don't expect them, just because they're watching a video like this, that means they're going to recant Islam. Don't be surprised if they even affirm the teaching of Islam. Don't be even more surprised if they attacked me or Bill or both of us, because remember, they are in a pickled position. They have to either recant Islam and go along with what you're expecting them to behave like, or assume, logical conclusion to stand up for themselves, which they can't if they want to live according to the teaching of Islam, or they're going to have to affirm the teaching of Islam and attack those who are attacking it. Either way, they are in a tough position. Until we meet again, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching. Please like our video, and we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, CIRA International. And be sure also to click the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we upload new videos into the channel. And finally, I like to prayerfully encourage you to become a patron through Patreon. Your giving is much needed and will enable us to produce more and more of videos like this so that we can publish them on a weekly basis. So thank you in advance.